Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Science of B2B. I'm Kerry Cunningham, and I head up Sixth Sense Research and Thought Leadership, and I'm a former Serious Decisions and Forrester analyst. Last time, if you were with us, you heard about how buyers go through 70% of their buying journey before talking to sellers. And that when they talk to sellers, they choose which vendor they talk to first, they choose the timing of it, and they end up buying from that vendor that they have chosen to talk to first 84% of the time. When we were doing this research and looking at the results, we ended up thinking of this as the point of first contact constant, which reminds me of a situation that I find absolutely fascinating. So I've been a big anthropology fan for a lot of my life, and I love reading about other cultures and what other cultures have lived like in historical times, but even now. And that really unique moment when a culture has come into contact with the Western world for the first time, that point of first contact with the Western world. And there are a lot of things you could say about that moment, both bad and some good. But what you can say about all of them is that forever changes those cultures. That is not true with B2B. So the reason it made me think of it is because it's very different in B2B. When buyers have their first contact with sellers, we've thought of that as the beginning of the buying process, the beginning of the selling process for sure. But what the data says is that the decisions are largely made and do not change very much after that point of first contact with sellers. And that's remarkable. I never even imagined that that's what we would see, but that's very clearly what the data say. We're going to talk about the point of first contact in two different episodes. In this one, we're going to talk about the fact that this point of first contact is a constant. And in the next one, we'll talk more about what goes on in that point of first contact or what happens before that point of first contact. So one of the things that we looked at when we were doing the research is, does that point of first contact point, does that change based on any of the things you might think about? So in other words, do some purchases tend to have earlier contacts? Do some industries tend to have more contact with sellers earlier on? Do renewals have earlier contact with sellers than net new purchases? And then what we were really fascinated to look at was, does the member of the buying team, depending upon their role, depending upon their level of the organization, do they have different points of first contact? None of the things that I just mentioned, industry, type of purchase, whether it was hardware, software, services, those kinds of things, level in the organization, not the buying role of the person we interviewed. None of that has any effect on the point of first contact. In fact, all of those say that no matter what, they're having that first contact within the margin of error of 70%. There's something very, very important that tells us. One, when a buying team member has an interaction with a selling team member, they are doing it as part of a team. There's not some period of time where members of a buying team go off and have discussions with members of selling teams on their own and then come back to the team and share what they found. That's not really what's happening. I suppose they could be splitting up and taking on different vendors, but if that were the case, then they wouldn't be telling us that 84% of the time they talk to the winning vendor first. The evidence points very strongly to the fact that when a buying team starts interacting with a selling team, they're doing it together. Now, of course, there's probably somebody on the team who is reaching out to set up those first conversations, but that happens within a week or 2 weeks at the most from the time they have the first interaction. So somebody reaches out, they fill out a form and say, contact me. They reach out to a sales rep, they initiate that first contact, but the rest of the team gets involved within a couple of weeks. And that difference, that small difference won't show up in the data. But it's not months in advance that's happening. That's a very compressed time frame, and it only happens at or around 70%. We were shocked by that, really, really surprised to see that people at the VP level and above, they say 70%. People who are the financial ratifiers versus the champions in the decision-making process, 70%. Industries, all the same. Another one that was very surprising. If I'm a renewal buyer versus a net new buyer, I thought, well, the renewal buyer would certainly be talking to sellers earlier. That's not what they say. Now, you're probably talking to lots of other folks in their organizations, at least I hope you are, but the conversation about renewing, they say they do it at 70%. That's what the buyers say, and that is the reality of B2B for us. Next time around, we're going to talk more about 70% and what's going on in that 70%. Why does it take so long for buyers to want to talk to us? I want to remind everybody that we have the Buyer Experience Report that you can find on our website. We also have a report called the Buyer Identification Report, and that's a report about what marketers say they're doing. This is really a benchmark to understand what your peers are doing to try to identify buyers. So those reports go very closely together. Buyer experience, what's the buyer doing in their journey? Buyer identification, what are marketers doing to identify those buyers in their journeys? And I've got a little preview for you. The two things are not very well aligned. And one of the purposes of this enterprise science of B2B is to help you all get aligned to that reality of B2B. All right, so next time we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about that 70% constant. We're going to talk about what was going on in that 70% and why it takes so long. And so we'll get to that next time. In the meantime, thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.